And this whole question of what's going on with the budget. Who is A, to blame? B, is it a problem or is it not a problem? I mean, Japan's debt to GDP ratio, their debt is over 200% of GDP, and Japan is doing fine. Thank you very much. Setting aside the consequences of the nuclear reactor meltdown. Peter Ferrara with the ACRU.org, the American Civil Rights Union, has a new book, America's Ticking Bankruptcy Bomb. Peter, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
Peter, do you have a mortgage on your home?
No, I don't. I actually sold my home to pay my income taxes, so I don't have a home anymore.
I'm sorry to hear you're so broke. You have in the past, though, had mortgages on your house.
Yes, I have in the past had mortgages on the house. I had an asset there that was equal to more than the value of the mortgage each time.
Right. Was your concern when you mortgaged your house the amount of the mortgage or the amount of the monthly payments?
Well, the biggest concern, the bank's concern was the amount of the mortgage. My concern was the amount of the monthly payment.
Right. And so let's take that to the national debt. Regardless of what the national debt is, the interest that we're paying on it right now is about $300 billion a year. And we can easily afford that. So what's the big deal?
Well, on our current course, the national debt is already at the highest level in American history except for World War II. And on our current course, it's going to rocket past that level, up to that all-time record, and rocket right past it. And then it's going to continue up to the level of national debt relative to the economy that was suffered by Greece when they fell into national bankruptcy. And then it's going to rocket right past that. And so the concern right now, 43 cents of everything the federal government spends is borrowed. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the federal welfare programs consume 95%.
That's actually not true, Peter.
I got it right out of Obama's budget. It's right in Obama's. If you got numbers that are different, your numbers are wrong, and my numbers, I got it right out of President Obama's budget. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the income security programs, which are mostly federal welfare programs, consume 95% of all federal revenues. What's left is not even enough to pay interest on the national debt, which is 10% of federal revenues. Everything else the federal government does, national defense, law enforcement, transportation, agriculture, all the cabinet departments outside of those entitlement programs all has to be borrowed.
They're all less than 5% of our total federal budget? The Defense Department is less than 5% of our total federal budget? Are you serious?
No. I said federal revenues, 95% of federal revenues. But federal revenues, as you know, are not anywhere near the amount of outrageous, runaway, explosive government spending under the Obama administration.
Well, they're not anywhere near where they were before the Reagan tax cuts.
They're not any. Well, the federal.
Before the Reagan tax cuts, we had a government that worked just fine. Thank you very much.
Let me give you my response to your comment. Federal revenues as a percent of GDP are down now because of the
because we're in a depression.
Yes, that's right. Because we're in a depression under President Obama. That's true.
And it started
and CBO's numbers, President Obama's numbers, Paul Ryan's numbers all show that when their economy returns to economic growth, federal taxes as a percent of GDP will return to their long-term historical levels. In fact, unless the Obama tax increases of 2013 are repealed, federal taxes as a percent of GDP after the recovery will exceed the long-term historical level that they've been at since World War II otherwise.
How do you deal with the fact that when Ronald Reagan raised taxes, I'm sure you know, Ronald Reagan raised taxes 7 out of the 8 years that he was president, and that the largest tax increase in the history of the United States happened in 1982 on Reagan's watch. And when Reagan did that, and this is, by the way, not from some left-wing crazy. This is from Bruce Bartlett, who was Reagan's, the number 2 guy in Reagan's Treasury Department.
I know Bruce Bartlett. He wasn't the number 2 guy on Reagan's anything, but he was a friend of mine during the Reagan years. He is no longer a friend of mine because he actually has lost his mind. But
well, he said here's the numbers. Looking at real gross domestic product, it grew 4.5% in 1983 and 7.2% in 1984. Exceptionally strong performance. Stock market had one of its best years in '83. Both the Dow Jones and the Standard & Poor's rose 35%. There was no increase in the rate of inflation, which was exactly the same in 83 and 84 as it was in 82. Unemployment rate fell from 10.6% to 8.1% to 7.4% from 82 to 84. And this was all the consequence of the largest tax increase in the history of America during Ronald Reagan.
Well,
now, why is it that when Reagan raises taxes, the economy gets better? When Bill Clinton raises taxes, the economy gets better. When Reagan then dropped taxes, the economy got worse. And when George W. Bush comes in and drops taxes, the economy gets worse. Why is it that when the top tax rate was 90% during the Eisenhower administration and the Kennedy administration and the Johnson administration and 74% during the Nixon administration?
Kennedy cut the rates. That's not accurate.
Kennedy did not cut the rates. Lyndon Johnson cut the rates.
This is the longest question in world history, actually, right here. I hope you got this recorded. And let's send it to the Guinness Book of World Records. I think you just set a record. This is the longest question in world history. I don't agree that the 1982 tax increase was the largest tax increase in world history, but more importantly
not world history, in American history.
Or in American history. But more importantly, more important point is that what's important for the economy is not the tax burden as a percent of GDP so much, it's the tax rate that's important. And what Reagan did was reduce the top tax rate from 70% all the way down to 28%.
That's basically the tax paid by millionaires and billionaires, yes.
And
it devastated our economy and created a $2 trillion debt.
With just one more rate. No, actually, revenues doubled during the 1980s.
And created a $2 trillion debt.
And well, it was the spending that created a $1 trillion debt.
No, it was the tax cut.
The revenues doubled. So
it doesn't matter. Revenues double because economies grow. If you give me $2 trillion to stimulate an economy with, as Ronald Reagan did, of borrowed money, you let me borrow $2 trillion and pump it into the economy, I can show you what it looks like to live large.
It was the most successful.
What Ronald Reagan did is what FDR did. He took $2 trillion borrowed dollars, threw it into the economy.
Okay, so this is are we going back to interviewing yourself again? Why don't you let me know when my interview starts? I thought it was going to start at 1:05.
Next minute's all yours, Bruce or Peter. Excuse me.
Well, it was the cut in tax rates was the most successful economic experiment in world history. I document the results in my book, America's Ticking Bankruptcy Bomb. I show what happened after he did that as compared to before. It's the 1970s. How every economic statistic by 1982 had been trending downward for many years. They reversed in 1982, 1983, and turned upward.
This is when he raised taxes.
Economic growth, unemployment improved, inflation collapsed, family income started.
That's what I just said. This is when he raised taxes.
Started falling again. You know, you can look it up. All the statistics turned bad around 1972. They got worse by 1978. When he came into office, every economic statistic was bad. By 1982, 83, every one of those statistics turned around, and there was a 25-year economic boom, what Art Laffer and Steve Moore rightly called the greatest period of wealth creation in the history of the planet. More wealth was created in America from 1982 to 2007 than all of prior American history from George Washington up to Ronald Reagan combined. So that is why it's the most successful experiment in world history.
Okay, Peter, you made your point.
Tax rates again. That's what we need.
You made your point. You made your point really well. I just don't understand why we don't see anything that was built from Reagan forward.